So many things in my pocket. My utility belt is full.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you very much. So this is the fall talk series getting started, and I have the pleasure of being part of putting this on, and we look forward to any contributions you guys have in terms of who would be a great speaker here. We've had fantastic speakers from every possible exciting place you can name, from Google to Stanford to SRI and everybody in Park. What I'll point out is that I have a tendency to encourage you to ask questions. I've gotten a little tired of leaving the microphones on because they do weird things to the audio. So when you want to ask a question, until the end, I'll turn on the microphones then for all, but you have to push on this stupid black surface in the front of that microphone and watch the light turn on. And then you can ask a question. It's a very good thing to do because we have people that will listen to this later on, and even people out in cyberland watch this. So today we have one of the most exciting people I've ever met with me, Walter de Brouwer. Walter made his first company, one that put the internet backbone into Europe, and he made a research lab called Star Lab, which ran for several years in Brussels. He's been very associated with the Media Lab. He ran the OLPC operations for at least for Africa, and he's started many companies. He was the publisher of Mondo 2000, so many exciting things. But that's not why he's here. He's here because he's taken on a very, very big and very exciting challenge and has tremendous progress to show for it. And that progress has been in sensing everything about the human body. So he's making the medical tricorder. He was a big part of creating the medical, XMed, the challenge around that activity. He also runs TED Brussels, is it? Yeah, and also runs the funded. He runs a section of that in Brussels as well. So very, very busy man. And today he's here to tell us about the medical tricorder, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. So, ladies and gentlemen, so just to tell you something about the things I've done in my life so that you can situate it a bit. So I used to be, because I always say like, I really feel that this is the 80s all over again. And it's great to sometimes reconsider, why it is the 80s and how we get there. So in the 80s, I was an academic. So I was in the computer lab of various universities, and I was ready for my tenure. But in '89, due to some, I left actually academia and to become a publisher. And so I learned a lot about doing business as a publisher, because you have to actually publish, you have to keep every deadline, because these presses start and these presses stop, and the people are there, and you have to be one day before your competition, and you have to. So being a publisher was great in the 80s. Now it's not so great anymore, I think. And luckily I had, as an obscure person who grew up in Brussels and in Paris, I had this enormously powerful publisher, American friend called Bill Ziff, and so who taught me all about, what to put on the cover and how to work on your audience, because we're publishing in 4 countries, computer magazines. So we had labs where we tested computers, like 18 daisy wheel printers tested against each other. Nobody reads that stuff anymore, but in the 80s this was like big news, who was to be the winner. And I learned how to really work in a quantified way to consumers, like why did we sell more in that place, what could we do. So, but in the 90s, the internet started, and before we knew we were into it, and in 92, I remember we bought the first 1,000 Motorola modems to install in Europe. And basically what we did is, so we had the Linux groups, and we organized all the Linux groups in Europe into one big conglomerate, and this became a company, and that company was called EUNet, and together we were the backbone. So basically we set up modems all over Europe. We connected it via our university lines with the national lines of the telecom, and the last thing we had to do was we had to go to America and negotiate with AT&T, and so that we had IP. And so in the end, well, to cut a long story short, we merged with Quest Communications, and we became the third long distance carrier of the US. And so I'm now talking about 93, 94. You know, we had browsers, everything. You know, the market boomed because suddenly we were in telecom. And telecom was like an old market, but we were the fresh winds. There was no more zero-sum game. You know, like we made 20% more customers every day, you know, on the internet, and you know, some telecoms couldn't follow. So these were really great days. So so when, you know, Quest at that time was thousands of people, and so I left to do another. We had our engineering department. We couldn't hire enough engineers, IT people, because we hired them and then they were hired away, and we couldn't even follow in teaching them how to code, because by the time they could code, they would disappear. So we set up Jobscape. I set up together with 3 friends Jobscape, and in 7 countries in Europe and later in 12 countries, we were looking for engineering talent, and we were looking for that on the net. And we renamed it as Stepstone, and it went to the London Stock Exchange. It was a big IPO in 2005. So, sorry, in 1995. So, 1996. So a lot of these things just happened overnight. You know, like we started in publishing, and suddenly we were in Backbone, and we were in telecom, and we were again in publishing. But always with the consumer in mind. And then I decided in 1996 to become a sponsor of the Media Lab at MIT. And this was also a great time, because it's where the biggest success days of the Media Lab, because everything suddenly had become media, and you know, the most interesting people in the world worked there, and you know, there were parties all night, and you know, free lunches, free dinners, you know, free everything. And together with Nicolas Negroponte in 1997, I set up a very, you know, pretty big lab. We started with 100 scientists in Brussels. And this lab would do blue sky research. So everything that universities would think too long term, this lab would do, and they would do it for corporations. So this was a bit of a crazy narrative, but it became widely successful because, you know, there are big corporations in the world, and they don't want actually to do very exciting research inside their walls, because, you know, just imagine if you would hire Einstein in your company, you know, you would probably, you know, destroy the atmosphere, or he would never be there, and he would be the most paid person, and, you know, you would never see him. So in 2001, so when everything went south, so MIT closed everything outside the US, which was actually, you know, like, so Ireland was closed, so we had to do something else. So I was actually at that time so angry against bankers because I lost all our money that I decided to become a banker and to see how this all worked. And this was actually a great experience in my life. I did that for 5-6 years. It's nothing so lucrative and so simple as banking, and but it's very boring, so that you have to take with it. But it pays well, and you know, you can go home at 3 or 4 and have, you know, even, you know, you push up your costs to the highest levels, and still you have to pay tax. So in 2007, I joined MIT again for one laptop per child because they needed, like somebody who could talk to the financial institutions because they needed hundreds of millions of dollars to produce a laptop. And I also learned a lot from that because of in manufacturing, because you see in the labs we can make like one thing, but then suddenly you have to make 1 million of these things. And that's a completely different scale. And especially when you don't have any money and you have to negotiate in Shanghai, I can tell you these are epic journeys. But in 2010, I decided to. So I wrote a mail to my friends who were also involved in my previous ventures, and I said, look, I think the next thing to be disrupted is medical. There's only a couple of things left because education is now in the process of being disrupted, and so what is left? I can only see two things that are left. That's medical and government. And since disrupting government is against the law, so we have to do medical. So also in 2005, I spent like a year in the hospital because my youngest son had an accident. So, and during that year, I had become intimately aware of all the machineries and how the hospital worked, and I had been able to peek behind their firewalls, how everything actually worked, and I thought like, this is actually the last arena where the consumer is powerless. And, if you empower the consumer and you can network that, then, that's the last opportunity. So in 2010, I set up the company in San Francisco, and with IDEO, which is a very big design agency. And I'll tell you something about the thought process together with IDEO, because I chose IDEO particularly because of the thought process they go through before they become, so it starts like something very complex that becomes very simple, and then suddenly, people think like, hey, I could have done that. So in 2011, we moved to the NASA campus, because we decided to sign a NASA Space Agreement Act to have access to space medicine assets. And well, that's where we are. But let me tell you something about the thought processes so when we arrived in IDEO, we made a deal with IDEO. We wanted to pay them to have a team at our back and call inside IDEO for 3 months. And we would come out with a roadmap with a lot of focus group knowledge, and because we wanted to know who is the American medical consumer, the AMC. So one of the questions that we asked ourselves is, why is big data suddenly so important, and why suddenly is the corporate world completely obsessed with big data? And so one of my professors at university was a philosopher called Jacques Derrida. And so Jacques was especially known because of the decline of the grand narrative. And so basically he said the Enlightenment has produced a lot of great things, and it teaches people how to think about life, and it treats them actually as stupid and ignorant parts of society. And there is this grand paternalistic grand narrative that tells you how to live your life. And certainly in the 50s and the 60s, this had been, the post-war had been the success of the economy, the grand narrative that, you go to university, after university, you go into a big corporation, you go to corporate ladder, you come home, honey, I'm home, like all these big universals together in one incredibly simple narrative that everyone could follow. The problem is that with postmodernism, there is no grand narrative anymore. And we have all, there are now millions of micro narratives, and there are wikis and social narratives and tweets, which are sort of nano narratives. So why is big data so important? Because it corroborates narratives. It corroborates micro narratives. So every corporation in the world wants to corroborate its micro narrative. And it wants to fight with its micro narrative against other micro narratives. Now, in order for that to happen, something else in marketing has to happen. And, sort of a new Marshall McLuhan story. That is, the consumer has to be convinced that he can have control over randomness. He must be convinced that there is the illusion that he can control reality based on numbers. He must believe that quantification is for him a way to control his life and to improve his life. So all this, was one of our first thought processes when we arrived at IDEO. And we sincerely believe that medicine in 10 years from now would just not exist anymore. And it would not exist as a discrete category, but because it would become ubiquitous. It would disappear into the environment. And if it disappears into the environment, what is the structure, the fabric of that environment? The fabric of that reality is brands. So the brands are the strange attractors of our reality. So if medicine disappears, it will be absorbed by brands. So every brand you see there and every brand you can think of will actually, in the next 3 years, make an agenda and convince people that this is the part of medicine, of healthcare, that is the component of healthcare in their brand. Every brand will do that. That's what we went for. And we even made a roadmap, which was published on the Quantify itself. For instance, who will own the bathroom? Who will own the kitchen? Who will own the bedroom? In the bathroom, for instance, like who will make, a toothbrush that has a topology of your teeth and that goes to the, looking for caries? Who will make the comb that will count your hairs to quantify all of that? And perhaps, once you think in brands, think in real estate, and brands attract brands. So it is not beyond the powers of possibility that only 2-3 brands will own the bathroom, but which will they be? Because this was important for our partnering exercise. So with which companies are we going to partner? For instance, this is Wired. Wired came up with the toilet, which would be the lab of the future. Because if you if you post-process, in the toilet, then you don't need labs anymore. Cars. So we have lately worked a lot on cars, and there's 2 car manufacturers that are pretty important in that area. That's Ford and Toyota. And so what can you do? What is the magic that you can bring on healthcare in a car? So Ford thinks that it's the ECG in the seat, or it's the mirror. If you read the patents, you can see their micro narratives. So Toyota thinks it's the user interface and that they will open their API so that people can start writing apps for the cars. Because, I'm a recent immigrant in America, and I've quickly figured out that this is a very big country, and I'm spending the American dream in my car, because you have to go from here to there. So, a lot of what is happening on healthcare will also be monitored in the car. And so we also, first devices are going to be made that are, on our smartphones. Then we probably go in our smartphones But in the end, the only real success will be when these devices will be in our bodies. So, and there's a lot of them around already, and a lot of them waiting for FDA approval, stentables, implantables. A lot of people have stents, but we can't talk to them. Patchables are now in. The subdermals, why not? You can, instead of the EEGs, like you could just under the skin, implant it, wouldn't do any harm. Injectables, ingestibles, Proteus, for instance, Proteus Medical has an ingestible. This is it. So, you just put the patch here, you swallow the pill. It's 24 days. So the pill, goes around your bowel system and gives, cues. So you can know that, for instance, your grandfather who lives on the other part of the planet has not taken his medicine, and you get like, just a mail. The problem also is that there is this new trend of live caching, which people do with their phones. People want to, take certain points in life and just put them in stone for history, and also look back at their lives. It's a bit like surveillance, like cameras. So the camera is only necessary because it's only very significant after an incident. When the incident appears, you go and look back, and you profile, and you start to prevent that it doesn't happen anymore. So live caching now, how medicine is practiced, is punctuated. This is like, we go to the doctor here, a year later there, or 6 months later there, where there is actually no continuous movement. There is no time series. And in between, we forget what the previous doctor said, and we have no records, we have no access to our records. So all this will certainly change, because health streams are going to be a reality in the next 1 to 2 years, I think. The place of care will certainly shift. So we have to decentralize these hospitals. We can, first of all, no longer pay them, but we start to work the system. And once we are in the hospital, we want to have, the best attention, because we are starting to treat hospitals like our telecom providers. So more and more, so also, if you see the cost of a venue and where we are now, we are here, and, we need to be, down here. So this all has to shift towards the home. And then, of course, healthcare will become affordable, and government has produced, like governments all over the world have produced a name for this when they do this exercise. It's called empowerment. We will be empowered to take care of ourselves and pay for our own healthcare. So when we were when I was in telecom, so at a certain moment, I remember we had this meeting in New York with a lot of telecom providers, where the fate of, I think, 20 or 30,000 people was discussed, that all of us were going to lay off a lot of people. And this was at the height of the telecom boom. And it was not because of the cost. And so why were these people laid off? Well, because every introduction of a human being introduces an opportunity for an error. So if you take human beings out of the system, you have less errors, and it costs less. And so this is the problem with healthcare now. There's too many humans in it. So, and there's not enough machines. So this is Thomas Goetz's work from Wired, how you can actually, if Steve Jobs would have made health records or tests, it would have looked like this. And yet, when, you need a degree in Egyptology to read our records now. If you look at all the diseases and how machines can be better than, we came up with this, completely new, very precise area where actually machines are better than human beings. And this is like an area where machines and human beings should work together, and this is an area where actually carbon-based units should, dwell in. So it's not very black and white, but so there are actually three areas. We called it carbon chauvinism, and so that's, you know, like, so even in the 60s we had this. I remember when I, you know, in the 70s when I was, you know, like, when did calculators come? But I remember like teachers who said like, okay, you take your calculator, I'll be faster. You know, it was not the point. So the point is that some things are better left to machines and some things better left to human beings. And it's amazing that even, you know, in Silicon Valley, some of these things are still debated. You know, like that human beings are better than machines. We've lost that debate a long time ago. So we don't want to be better than machines. We just, you know, we just want to do less work. And we came up with a very simple slogan of, or definition of what the medical consumer wants. They want to explore the diagnostic space themselves. And they have the right to. They have the right to have medical tools and explore that diagnostic space. They have the right to second guess their doctor. They have the right to come up with better information when they go to hospital. They have the right to take their own measurements. So there is something derailed in how government actually participates in this process. And we came up with 4 ideals of the tricorder. You know, like, it should be non-cooperative. So that means that I should not cooperate with the machine. The machine should just do it without my cooperation. Should be non-contact, non-invasive, and non-sampling. So these ideals, we have certainly not reached them yet, but if we reach them, that will be that object of desire, that medical object of desire. And so, for instance, I learned in the States there is OnStar, which is a bit obsolete now, but still it works very well. So I pushed a couple of times just to find it out. So why don't we have OnStar for the body? You know, like, why don't we, you know, can we phone someone and say like, I don't feel good, what's the matter? It's like, well, your blood pressure is a bit high, oximetry is okay, but for the moment, you know, I would take it slowly. You haven't slept, you only slept 6.3 hours. That's so you've taken your medicine. I would like to have that. You know, who wouldn't phone a line like that? Autodiagnosis at your fingertips. This is what the consumer apparently wants. And whatever is what the law says, governments will never oppose big markets. It's far too dangerous. They only fight wars that are already lost. So you see, if the consumer, the problem with that is that the consumer doesn't know how to operate a stethoscope, or it doesn't know which rashes are good or well. So we have to get a lot of machine learning. You know, where we started with in the 90s, suddenly machine learning is all over the place now, and data analytics. So we have to de-skill doctors into machines in order for the consumer to have an opinion on what he sees with his device. And so we are organ donors, so why shouldn't we become data donors? So it's, I would rather give my data than my kidneys. So why don't we do that? So we have a big epidemiological problem, so why don't we all donate our data? So I think this is in the sharing mindset, the default mindset, but we think that health data will no longer be private in 5 years from now. So, and it will even be broadcasted. And, you know, like, it makes sense, because if you are sick, you can't shut up about it, and, you know, if you feel good, you also tell everyone. So look at patients like me, Cure Together, you know, these things work very well. But what we think is the next step to social networks is empathy networks, because I've witnessed that in hospital where people are trying to help each other, like, because people are sitting there in, you know, in shock, and they try to make sense of their environment. People who know how the machines work or how the information is distributed, and how diagnoses are present, and how statistics work, they help each other. So empathy networks will be something very, very big. Exposomics. So we hired Peter Jansen because he made the tricorder Mark II, not because he made tricorders best, but because he was an expert in exposomics. Exposomics is what the environment exposes you to. So measuring the environment on every step of the way, what we now also are going, so our patents on cars are mostly about exposomics. So while this car goes somewhere, what is the impact of the environment on that car? People want to know that. What is the impact of me living in Los Altos? So would it be, healthier to live in the hills or not? Would it be healthier to live in San Francisco? What does healthier mean? Is this a combination of UV filters and humidity plus that, or I want to see, cities are not computable, but they certainly will become computable in the next 50 years, I think. And then we will see a completely different profiles. It's probably healthier to live in one street than in another. So, Marshall McLuhan, so he said, we become the tools we use. Postman, Postman in his view of society, he said that there are tool user societies. Like Asia and Africa used to be tool using societies. Technocratic societies, like Europe. And according to Postman, there is only one technopolic society, and that is the US. I think he's right. So, and in a good way, but you have to see society as the latest tool. And and then we have to imagine ourselves, which is that tool that we can no longer be without, that if we are punished, they would take that tool away. It's, of course, the smartphone. So we should look at society more and more as operating like a smartphone. With, and what do we want from a smartphone? We want it to be passively collecting data, and we want it to auto-populate its registers. Now and then we want to update, but we want to check it, and then we want to see it. So society as a smartphone is an interesting metaphor. I can't go in it, but it's an interesting metaphor. So we also, that's bacon and eggs, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. How can we get people who are involved with their health committed? It's very, very difficult, because we normally only change to avoid change. We never really change. We say we change, but we don't. So is it possible? Is it possible to change our health in real time? It is. Technologically, it should be possible, but are we up to it? So once the tool that we produce gets adopted, how do we keep the user engaged? I think medicine will we will see at the 20th century as a century where medicine was unitary. Now we know it's protean. There are 10,000 cancers. I'm sure that we will, and other companies will put medical tools to the consumers. We will find out that we are all in possession of our own cancer, and there's probably millions or billions of cancers and billions of diseases. And the unitary progressive philosophy of medicine is probably going to be shattered. The biggest word, I think, in the next decade will be citizen. Citizen science, citizen doctors, citizen teachers, citizen priests. Everything that will be disrupted to the value of one. And we believe in citizen doctors, when with our own medical tools to help each other. And, nobody can beat the crowd, not even Kasparov. So even with a machine. So everything we always say about the crowd, that they're stupid, that they have no philosophy, that, well, Wikipedia is there, Britannica is not. So a lot of things that if we put medical tools in the hands of the crowd, there's no way how this will actually change the face of medicine. It will completely wikify it. Yeah, so we came up with, we had a lot of focus groups of doctors who said like, yeah, but the patient lies to me. And then we had actually, we set up focus groups of patients who said that doctors lie. And so, do doctors lie? Yes. Do patients lie? Yes. But, you know, lying is a cooperative act. In order for it to be accepted, the other party has to believe it. So when I talk to my doctor and I see he's not really paying attention, I make my symptoms a bit more serious. When I see that, then I make my symptoms down, because in the end, I am the narrator, and he's the Freudian construct, and I want to go out. Okay, you know, like tomorrow is another day. So do doctors lie? Yes, patients also. Lying helps, it works. This is we also, you know, like divergence is over, and convergence is something that is we only see beginning now. So we organize a big conference in Europe very soon on bits, atoms, neurons, and genes. Bang, and I'll come back to it later. So we have partnered with Stephen Wolfram. Stephen has been a friend of me for a long time, and although I do not share his beliefs in the computability of the universe, I believe in Wolfram Alpha, because it gives you a lot of statistics, and basically statistics make you feel better because it gives you a point of view. When people tell me that my hyperstolic pressure is 144, it doesn't really say anything to me, because the meaning is derived from the context where people who have my age, who live in these circumstances, who have my gender, you know, have the same, and I want to see in which percentile I am. We also believe that every company that should be set up should have a moral agenda to do good. And so if you don't find that moral agenda to do good, then you don't actually have a good company. And so for us, the moral agenda was the Nash equilibrium. And Nash equilibrium, you know, is a very, you know, so if you, apart from the formula, but you know, it's I don't know if you remember the movie A Beautiful Mind, but basically a Nash equilibrium, politically or economically translated, should be: it is okay to be successful and to make a lot of money as long as, you know, you improve, you know, the lives of the people around you. And so it's okay to be successful, I think, and every company is okay to be successful if they improve, you know, the lives, and if our lives are all about healthcare. So we also had a very interesting, this was 2011. In 2011 was the first year, and believe it or not, that porn-related searches were superseded by health-related searches. This means something. So McKinsey, so when we inquired about the numbers for the adult industry, so McKinsey said because it's a stagnant market, porn. Because 93% of the male population is considered a stagnant market. But so the health-related searches are done by everyone. So we are now at 1.28 times porn-related searches. Yeah, So everything we did, we wanted to put in the cell phone, in the smartphone. Actually, I don't remember why this slide is in there. Yeah, so all these things we found that were obsolete. So relationships are going to be, we are now in the process of changing every relationship into a transaction. So flesh and blood, also, we don't really care about it because we prefer actually going to the wall than talking to a banker. It's not actually brick and mortar that we don't like, it's flesh and blood. Text-based life is certainly losing. So more and more kids are now navigating through life with images and sound. Asymmetry, it's a big one because this is how the financial world works, and we still don't know how a symmetrical information world will look like and how we play non-zero-sum games. So we have to completely reconsider our economic models. And reimbursement-based medicine will certainly disappear because once the system knows it is being played, it destroys itself. I think it's a political message I took it from somewhere. I'm not actually I have no political affiliation. I've never even voted in my life. But I like it because, you see, we undervalue healthcare. So we don't want to pay $200 for, for a CT or no, that would be not enough. $200 for instance, an ultrasound, but a night on the town we are happy to pay $200. So $1,950 is now the price for a full body MRI in LA. So this is reaching consumer thresholds, and still we question the price because we compare it with entertainment and we are willing to pay a lot more for entertainment than for medicine. So it's going to be a hell of a lot more expensive. What is power to the people? It's CMOS. Everything you do in CMOS, will be widely attractive because it's very, very cheap. And it's old fabs. Vinod Khosla recently said that if healthcare is going to be disrupted, it will be disrupted by an outsider. And I think he's completely right. So in a lot of things I did in my life, also in banking, I could never have done if I had known what I was getting into. Also this company, when I started it almost 2 years ago, if I had known the things we are up to now, for instance, how to make hyperspectral sensors, so small, how to do the design work, how to get access to clean labs. If I had known that, I probably wouldn't have started it. So the reduction of knowledge is very, very important. So the disruption of healthcare will only be possible by somebody who has not actually been in healthcare, I believe. I'm not necessarily saying that it's me, but a lot of people in my company. Well, you see, the Media Lab, so we had this, and I've got an old picture of you there. So in the Media Lab, when we were there, we were pride ourselves. Yeah, we prided ourselves on inventing the future. I think our generation has now a new agenda. It is preventing it, because most diseases can be delayed or prevented. So it's a question of, it's again a timing issue. That's also a political message. But so can we change? I don't think we can change. But the illusion that we can change is the freedom of will is something very attractive to us. And we are only as healthy as the story we tell ourselves. So if we think that we can change it, it's very good. This is how we started in IDEO. Auto-population of records and passive collection of data So we thought it would be very, very important for medicine. And the product stack. You know, like we looked a lot of companies in Silicon Valley which were successful and which not. And of course, the one that comes to mind that everyone talks about is Apple. And I don't like to talk about Apple because it's so overworked. And but the idea of product stack and obsessively protecting its product stack is a very good idea. The only problem is that most people don't know what a product stack actually implies or what it means. So basically, it's very simple. It's hardware, software, and services. In your hardware, so you have, your labs, your manufacturing, your industrial design, and in your software, you have the different cycles. You have also your designers, because we are in mobile, so you have your cloud designers, you have your mobile designers, and in services you need your machine learning guys, your data analytics guys. The problem is, in a product stack, you have to own everything. There can be no prisoners, there can be no licenses, there can be no, and you have to own it. And that's difficult, that's very difficult. Because there's only, arriving at ownership, there's only several options. And all of them cost money. We also, so we had this weird question in LA to 700 people. And one of the questions was, if there would be several tricorders for sale, the tricorder that would only give you good news, although it is 4 times more expensive, which would you buy? 62% would buy the good news tricorder. And I don't say that we have to lie to consumers. I'm just saying this is the reality. People want good news. Bad news is not a good market. It's a good market probably for journalism and for government, but it's not a good market for consumers. Consumers don't want to pay for bad news. They want to pay for good news. But you think, how reading somebody's future works. Do you think they ever say like, oh my God, tomorrow you're going to die? Of course not, it's always great. So statistics, how can you be, people want the weatherman and not the anchor. Because during the weatherman, the weather, people relax. We've seen this, we had tests on this, how people look at weather reports. They relax. For them it's relaxation. It's a Zen time. It has already passed. Everything is good. So is it scientific or not? You know that the initial conditions cannot be computed. So nothing can happen. And the weather has already, tomorrow will be better. Or will be the same. So statistics are very important in your message. So to do the context, the semantics are very important. How you tell consumers things. And smile, smile, smile. Everything has to smile. So we talked to a lot of, for instance, the big retailers of the world. They have even smiling courses. Everyone has to smile. Smile all the time. So the first thing, the body language that the consumer wants to see is a smile. And then the good news and statistics. And then you have your good message. Medicine, truth, the law, and science are cultural products of the society they are in. So we have to, so this society is changing. We are in a transition of medicine being disrupted. So that also has to be part of the message. So people have to know that what they know, you know. But it has to, the revolutionary message has to be spread out with a smile. So all this actually came together into one big company, just, not a big company, so 20 people, but yeah. So I should stop now. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, well, you see, it's actually three words. It's consumers, medical, and smartphones. And so we organized our company like a hospital. And so we have a sensors lab, a medical imaging lab, molecular diagnostics lab, and we have data analytics. This is where our doctors sit. And molecular diagnostics, this is where our wet labs are. Medical imaging, this is where our lasers are. And sensors, this is our hardware lab. So all of these things, we want a major clinic, a complete major clinic to be integrated into your smartphone. And we want to this complete diagnostic experience, we want to be able to sell you this like universal healthcare. So this is the ideal of the, so we are here very, very far. So I think like every sensor out there we have tried. So it's basically all old Honeywell shit, you know. Medical imaging, we are, sorry.
People here are kind of less familiar than you with what sensors are available for medicine, so you might just want to...
I thought they were electrical engineers.
What?
Are they not electrical engineers?
They're doctors.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, well, for sensors, you know, like you have the usual, you know. Now for consumers, they really treat us like stupid because they put an accelerometer in it and they say like, you burn some fat and you have made 720 paces today. Good boy. You know, this is not what we want to know. We want to know our oxygen levels, our blood pressure, our heart. We want that compared to somebody else of our age. We want that compared to somebody else in the company. We want our heart rate, our breathing rate. I want my level of stress, my level of pain. I want how my muscles perform. I want to know where this back pain is coming from. I want to know what predicts that I have Parkinson or not. We can do that with voice pathology, for instance. If my depression is going worse or not, what is the effect of my medicine? This is what we want to know. Like this, you know, bands that say like that we burn fat. Come on, this is not medical. So it's time that there are some medical tools in the hands of the consumer. So most of these tools, you know, are sensors. Make them very, very small. Actually, our device is only, you know, that small. But actually, we could make it a lot smaller. We only make it that small because our first market is children. And our lawyers say that they shouldn't be able to swallow it. So we had all sorts of measurements of children's mouths. And that's how they come up with the dimensions. Because inside, it's actually very small. Medical imaging, ultrasound. Ultrasound is difficult because there are a lot of patents and basically nobody really understands ultrasound. There's only one guy in a hospital and when this guy is sick, there is no ultrasound. So it's a lot of experience of feature extraction which is, you know, inside the brains of these doctors. So because, you know, we tried and we looked at all the software available of ultrasound, of a pattern recognition, it just doesn't work very well. But we are not giving up. But on hyperspectral sensors, there's you know, there's a lot of future in that. That's actually the sensors that we put on spy satellites or on research satellites. And so these sensors, they shoot between 200 and 1,000 bands, colors, while we can only see 3 colors. So perhaps there's a lot of information in the other bands that we don't know of. If we correlate that with information from sensors and molecular diagnostics and analytics, we might come up with profiling that no medicine has ever come up before. So this is how we feel our empathy networks should work. You know, so you can follow actually people with the progression of disease. Or let's say that your child has a fever, you know, like you can follow it with other children, and you can see like how many of these did that. And you know, it's a bit like we believe that diagnosis is an old concept from the 20th century, and that the 21st century is more like actionable recommendations, what other people do. So I would rather have 10 expert patients telling me something than one expert doctor. But you could also see that when you look at the progression of this disease, you don't have to have healthcare, and you can still look into the system, you know, and you see what doctors have advised. Because for children, it's actually pretty simple. It's either an antiviral, antibiotics, or chicken soup. So, and you can also actually do a lot of triage. So, at the 63 million kids, that's our first market now. So these are a bit of the slides that we are using, as you see. So on this slide, you have heart rate, breathing rate. You have your breathing rate. Sorry, you have the fever, probably here. That's oximetry. What is that? Oh, that's ECG. A blood pressure. Where is blood pressure? Anyway. So we've built actually a fort of algorithms. Algorithms are actually very difficult and very easy, because once you know how it works, you can actually code them in 2 lines and then put them into all sorts of other code, and together with sensor data, it becomes like this big complexity package of which we call a trade secret, which you then package in a data product. And so everything that we have a rodeo view of medicine. Everything has to happen in 8 seconds. It's in the rodeo how long you have to be on the bull, you know. So everything has to happen in 8 seconds. So when you take the device, in 8 seconds it has to read all this. So because you have some devices, you have to wait like 5 minutes. No, you know. So 8 seconds. This is what people, because 8 seconds is also Twitter. Twitter is 8 seconds after reality. This is our next version, which has a lot of gas sensors in, and special high-definition microscopes, microphones, and optical stethoscopes, and will be ready in 2 years, we think. This is what we are working on now. This is a spectrometers which we put inside phones. This is a Samsung. Can't get into Apple, of course. Gas sensors for urine analysis. So we made a very small spirometer. We're going to make it smaller and smaller so that it can measure asthma and lung capacity and pneumonia. This is one of our top products. It will probably take like 3 to 4 years to build. And this is like a DVD at home, where you can have your complete lab results, Chem12, nucleic acid testing, no complete blood count, but all the rest. So you have your complete lab at home, and you know, you just put your finger in it. So we are now actually collating all sorts of technologies in there and making them integrate and work together. And yeah, this is the urine analysis. It's, you know, we are making this for less than $1. So people just take one, you put some urine on it. But it's not only a pregnancy test, but it's also for preeclampsia, kidney failure, urinary. And so there's an app, you just look at it. So the app looks at the color graphics and the information and stores that immediately. Yes, that's about it. Yeah, sorry.
It's kind of tremendously exciting and a little hard for us to grasp. I know that you have working equipment over there. Of course, you're you're in building the product and getting it out mode, so it's not completely clear how deeply you can tell us about all of it. But I want to make sure that there's a moment, even though we're running just a little late, for people to ask a question. I'm especially excited about students asking questions. Does anybody have a question? I'll just...
Yes. Sorry?
What does the name mean? Skeleton.
Oh, well, it's so it actually from a Coleridge poem. For the first time he used opium, and it's from Xanadu, with Kubla Khan, a pleasure dome decree where Alf, the ancient river, ran far from remembrance of men into an ancient sea. Coleridge thought that opium would be very beneficial to health, and so scan in the word. So I used, instead of Xanadu, I used Scanadu.
Any other questions? Well, I want to say just one thing, that Walter is looking for people that are either going to be his rockstar app developer for mobile and also for analytics. So there's opportunities for people that that are looking for those kinds of opportunities in a startup. And we will now adjourn to go and have a cheap cookies. Oh, there's one more question. Is there a question online? Do you want to read it?
How much of your work is software versus hardware versus social?
Very good question. Software versus hardware versus social.
I would say, for the moment, and 60% hardware, 30% software, 10% social. But it's, of course, completely reverse, because you can't make money in hardware, so you need to work with it.
So it's kind of an amazing thing in this day and age that you would actually have to make hardware, but it's an exciting thing because hardware is at a point where we can get to spectrophotometers. Lots of things that people used to spend tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars are going to be in devices that are going to be in people's lives. And Walter's working really hard to do that for medicine.
Luckily, we have a big 3D printers. So when once we have once we have a design, so we can 3D print it, and then it takes like an hour to get the electrodes working and polish it a bit. Otherwise, it would take like weeks to go to a lab somewhere to produce. Now we can produce it. It's ugly, but it works. 3D print.
So thank you. I'm sorry to keep you late, but you can continue the conversation out in the hallway.